Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. This week on the 302, we are decking the halls for Yuletide at Winterthur. You're going to want to get a pen or paper, maybe even your cell phone. This show is going to be inspiring for the holidays. Get ready, the 302 is about to give you a great big present. Welcome to Winterthur, where they are decking the halls for the holiday season. We're going to be talking about Yuletide, a beautiful indoor festival of flowers and Christmas. I'm joined now by Debbie Harper to talk a little bit more about this annual glorious event. Debbie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. We're so glad you're here.
So tell us a little bit, for somebody who maybe hasn't been to Winterthur before, what is Yuletide?
This is year 42
Wow.
of Yuletide at Winterthur, so it has occurred for a long time. And we take Mr. DuPont's exquisitely decorated rooms, his big entertaining rooms where his own guests would have been entertained during Christmas, and we decorate them for the holidays, some representing his own holiday customs, and some that just have fabulous, glorious decoration in them, like this dried flower tree behind me. That's not something Mr. DuPont did, but it's something we do for our visitors to help them get in the mood for the holidays. And many people come here very early in the season because it is the start of their holiday season to come here.
So when people come for a visit, they can really get a glimpse back in the way that you set things up at what a slice of life for the holidays would have been like for the DuPonts.
Absolutely, yes. We have a number of displays, and we're fortunate in having an archive to inform those displays about the DuPont family holiday traditions. And so we have letters and lists and invoices. We've got some photographs. We have menus. Mr. DuPont called his holiday display his Christmas show. And so we think he gave us quite a precedent for doing our own Christmas show, but borrowing on the elegance and the lavishness and the attention to detail that was always a hallmark of his decorating.
Now, a lot of the things that you have, as in every area of Winterthur, are items that he might have selected or his wife might have selected or played some. Talk to me a little bit about just the richness of what you have to put on display.
Sure. Well, Winterthur is a very large house of about 175 rooms, and it is furnished entirely with American furniture that was made prior to 1860. So Mr. DuPont was looking to honor American craftsmanship by collecting American antiques and using them to furnish his home. And then he complemented them with all the accessory items, the ceramics and the rugs and what have you, that were not being made in America, but which Americans were importing during that time. The difference is, for us, they're precious antiques that we tiptoe around. For him, it was the furniture. People sat on the chairs, they ate off the dishes, they slept in the beds. So, you talk about an immersive experience with history. That was definitely the experience for Mr. DuPont's own guests. It is the world's premier collection of American antiques of the pre-Civil War time period. And so that's the basis. That's what we have to work with. We have got great material to work with.
Definitely, and a lot of history.
Yes.
Now, you had said that Mr. DuPont would not have had this floral tree, but this is kind of, I'd hate to say the star of the show, because you have a full cast of stars as far as not just this exhibit, but in general. But tell us a little bit about where did this come from? How long does it take?
Sure. This is a tree that was first created by our floral designers at Winterthur in the mid-1980s, and they put it here in the conservatory. Mr. DuPont had always had his tree in the conservatory, but it had colored glass lights and colored glass balls and tinsel on it. They diverged from that in the mid-1980s to create this tree as an homage to Mr. DuPont's love for the Winterthur garden. And it was so popular with our visitors that it's one of the few displays that people see every single year on the Yuletide tour because they love it so much. And people come back every year just to see this tree.
So do you happen to know how many flowers and how long it takes and when do they start?
Oh gosh, well, in terms of how many flowers, thousands. I don't ask the floral designers to count them. There are about 65 or 70 different cultivars, so about 70 different varieties of flower that are on it. In terms of starting it, it's an all-year process. The flowers that you see on the tree first appear in floral arrangements in the house, and those are changed out weekly. And so when the flowers are taken out, the fresh flowers, the ones that are still in good condition, we immediately dry them in preparation for going on this tree. And so it's an all-year process to create this tree.
And it really lends itself to the whole preservation theme that is seen throughout not just Winterthur, but the grounds as well.
It is very much so. Mr. DuPont was highly influenced by nature in his collecting, in his design. He deliberately incorporated natural effects into his interiors, and so this tree beautifully complements that. And when you speak of the preservation, you know, he was a great recycler, interestingly, before it was an in thing to do. And so we like the fact that we are recycling our flower arrangements into this tree, and then when this tree is done, these flowers are donated to other nonprofits that use them for their own craft projects with their visitors. So we feel like we get a good run of these dried flowers, and that it's very much in keeping with Mr. DuPont's own tendency to recycle and reuse materials.
One of the things that I really love about you guys is that you take one of your exhibits and you blend it into another, and you kind of like get a multitask with them. So, and speaking of the preservation, you have an exhibit called Outside In, which is reflected in other trees.
Yes.
But you're also, that is going on now, but you also have an exhibit that is coming up that's going to be highlighted through trees. So we're going to talk all about trees when we return.
Hi, I'm Beth, and this is Ken, and we're owners of the Auditorium, and we want to startle you on the 302.
Welcome back. We're at Winterthur, and we're talking about all the fabulous trees here. Now, Debbie, how many trees do you have set up?
Gosh, how many trees do I have set up? Probably about 8 or 10. I'm not sure this year. I'd have to do a mental calculation.
And they have different. Now, each of your trees have different themes, correct?
Themes. Yes, absolutely. So many of them recall the garden, as this does, but in different ways, much more focused on specific garden areas. Others are really taking inspiration from our Outside In exhibition, which also takes inspiration from Mr. DuPont's referencing nature in his decor. And so some of them are brand new trees that were created really in celebration of that exhibition, but borrowing decoration in the house that has naturalistic ornament. And then we have a very traditional tree representing Mr. DuPont's own Christmas tree in one room with the colored glass balls and the colored lights. And of course, we have a tree that was first created by Jackie Kennedy in 1962.
Okay, so let's unpack all of that. First of all, let's start with the one tree that I think is really beautiful is the one with the butterflies at the top. And that mimics, is that wallpaper?
The wallpaper, yeah, the wallpaper in the Port Royal entrance hall. That was the entrance hall that Mr. DuPont used himself and that his guests used in the 1930s and 40s. It's an exquisite hand-painted Chinese wallpaper from the 1760s, and it gives a bower-like effect to the room so that when people came in from his garden, they didn't leave the garden because it was still this garden-esque sense of envelopment around them. And so we took inspiration from that wallpaper to create a tree that recalls the plants and the butterflies and the birds that were in the wallpaper itself.
It's really amazing when you see, instead of, you know, where you would see a traditional star, you see a fluttering of butterflies that just kind of, and it goes throughout the tree, which is gorgeous.
Yes.
But the thing that really takes your breath away, I mean, as if there wasn't enough to take your breath away, the two birds. What kind of birds are at the foot of the tree?
They are a ring-tailed pheasant on the left and a great blue heron on the right, and they are on loan to us from the Delaware Museum of Natural History. our exhibition Outside In is a partnership with the Delaware Museum of Natural History. And so some of their staff came over and examined our wallpaper to get a close look at the birds that are in that paper. And then they loaned us some birds to complement the effect of the tree that recalled the wallpaper by having birds that recalled the wallpaper.
Now, another recollection of sorts, the sconces, the wooden, the paper sconces, it's so gorgeous in what you guys have done in that tree. Talk to us about that.
We have a couple of quill work sconces in one of the rooms. Quill work is paper filigree, thin strips of paper that are rolled around a quill very tightly and then pinched and pulled and glued together to create floral forms and to create animals. It's an artwork or a form that was taught to girls in Boston in the early 1700s. It was a very elite thing for girls to do, very expensive materials that came from all over the world. But girls were taught to do this in Boston, and it was borrowing, of course, on a naturalistic design. So our floral designers looked at those sconces for inspiration and created a tree that has the quillwork ornaments, animals and shells and such on it.
And it's amazing when you look at it that it's all paper or wood, and it's just so intricate.
It is very intricate. It's lovely.
So let's talk a little bit about your designers. You have several trees that each of them have, you know, really poured their hearts into. One of them being a tree of silk flowers, is that right?
We have a tree of silk flowers. Do you mean the azalea woods tree by any chance?
Yes.
Okay, that's a magnificent tree. That's down in the Reedburn Stair Hall. And yes, we have a very talented lighting designer at Winterthur. His name is Mac Truax, and he also is unbelievably talented at creating trees that recall specific areas of the Winterthur garden. Mr. DuPont in his garden often gardened with just one type of plant in a particular area, and so we have a peony garden, we have an azalea garden, and so Mac created trees that celebrate these distinct garden areas within the larger Winterthur garden. It is absolutely magnificent. It is breathtaking and beautiful. And of course, our hope is that people seeing this incredible tree inspired by azalea woods, they will come back in May and visit azalea woods.
Definitely. Now you have more than one designer that did trees, right?
Right. I also have our floral designers. They, of course, do this tree, but they also did the quilling tree. They did the tree with the butterflies on it that you referenced. They did an exquisite tree in another room that is not a natural influence, but really took inspiration from the room itself, and it has glass ornaments and chandelier drops and really very, very elegant, all in gold and white. It's quite beautiful. And then the other designed tree would be, of course, the tree that recalls Mrs. Kennedy's 1962 tree. And that was done by my assistant, Catherine Westbrook.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that tree when we return.
Hi, this is Susan Randolph, Executive Director at the Marshall Steam Museum, and we're about to go full steam ahead with the 302.
Welcome back. We're talking about Christmas trees at Winterthur and, of course, the Yuletide exhibit. Now, Debbie, there's a very special tree that kind of looks forward to 2022 and a very special exhibit. Talk to us a little bit about the Jackie tree.
Okay, this is a tree that recalls Jacqueline Kennedy's 1962 White House tree, which was in the grand foyer of the White House, which of course has a stair hall in it. So we put it into our grand stair halls, the equivalent of our grand foyer here at Winterthur. But Mrs. Kennedy was really significant in the history of White House Christmas decoration because she was the one who introduced themed holiday decor to the White House. And that is a tradition that has continued ever since at the White House. And so really themed trees, they're very common today, but they were not common in the 1960s. So she was really quite the trendsetter in creating a themed Christmas tree. Her tree in 1962 celebrated childhood, and so it's filled with toys, stuffed animals, wrapped presents, candy canes, sailboats. There's a Humpty Dumpty on it. It was lit with candles, electric candles, even in 1962. And it also has a very special ornament in that it has a miniature PT-109 on it in order to celebrate President Kennedy's service in World War II. Mrs. Kennedy had that on her tree, so we have it on our tree.
That's a very interesting story because you couldn't exactly find that, right?
We couldn't. We searched everywhere. We thought somebody had to have been making toy PT boats that we could buy one and just put it on the tree. We were not able to find any, vintage or new. The only thing that we could find were kits. They were rather pricey, and then of course that assumes you have the time and ability to put together one of those kits. So that's not something we were inclined to, and my intrepid assistant, Catherine, instead found somebody who would 3D print her a PT 109, which she did, and then we custom painted it to go on the Christmas tree.
And it's to pay homage to military
to President
service.
Kennedy, for his service.
You can also see, the family roots on that tree. You've got a lighthouse.
Yes, the sailboats,
the
obviously
sailboats.
referencing President Kennedy, who of course loved to sail. So yes, there are a lot of family influences, I think, on that Christmas tree as well. And of course, the reason we're doing it, why are we doing a Jackie Kennedy tree,
Sure.
is because of our upcoming exhibition in the fall, which is about Jacqueline Kennedy and her friendship with Henry Francis DuPont.
I think there's going to be a lot of people who will be very excited.
I think so. Jacqueline Kennedy is such an icon of style and grace and fashion, even to today. And of course, when she decided to restore the White House, she came to Winterthur and asked Henry Francis DuPont to head up the Fine Arts Committee that was charged with that project because he had the connections, he knew the antiques, he knew the dealers, he knew the collectors, and so he was able to facilitate that in acquiring the exquisite objects that people see when they go to the White House today. Interestingly, though, they worked together. It started as a professional relationship, but they became very good friends, this octogenarian and the youngest First Lady. And so the exhibition is all about that. We have an extensive archive, again, of correspondence and photos and such between the two of them, and that's the basis on which we're building the exhibition.
So when you look around Winterthur, it's easy to see why Jackie would have such admiration for Mr. DuPont's exquisite taste. So talk to me a little bit about some of the rooms that we're going to be seeing when we come to Winterthur, especially for Yuletide. There's New Year's Calling, is that right?
New Year's Calling is down on the 4th floor, which is where it happened every year in the formal reception room. New Year's Calling is an ancient tradition among the DuPont family. It was more widely celebrated historically among others, but the DuPonts continue the tradition to this very day. And the tradition is that on January 1st, the women in the DuPont household families will gather at particular houses in hostess groups. The men will go out in their parties in chauffeur-driven cars, and will travel around and call at all of the different houses. And they will bring small gifts for the women, and the women reciprocate by providing some refreshments for the men. When Winterthur was a private home, of course, in the 1930s, 1940s, Mrs. DuPont would be here receiving her husband's male relatives, while he was out calling on his female relatives. And typically the small gift was candy. And she reported one year that she received about 200 of her husband's male relations in the course of New Year's Day. So she received 200 boxes of candy.
Oh no.
She did what all of us would do. She re-gifted to the nurses at Wilmington Hospital. She did not eat all of that candy herself, but shared the bounty with others. And that is a tradition, as I say, that continues among the DuPonts today. On January 1st, 2022, the ladies will gather at various locations. The men will travel around. They will still be bringing small gifts to the women. It's still candy, but it's broadened out a bit to jams and nuts and some other things as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the dinner. The table is so beautiful.
It is gorgeous, and people who were at Winterthur when the DuPonts lived here commented on the exquisite show on the table. It changed every year. Mr. DuPont had an incredible eye for bringing together a centerpiece, usually flowers, but not always, but a centerpiece that would inspire the rest of the table, and having dishes and custom-made linens and glassware, even that was custom-made, that complemented whatever the centerpiece was on the table. And so it was all just really quite exquisite. And then, of course, a meal at Winterthur was sourced pretty much entirely from Winterthur farms. And so you talk about having incredibly fresh food and knowing where it came from. Everything
Farm to table.
from seafood was everything but seafood was pretty much sourced here. The meal varied from year to year. We have menus, and so we know it was not always the same, with the exception that it always began with Mr. DuPont's mother's recipe for terrapin soup. And the terrapin crawled around in the basement of the house until it was dispatched for the terrapin soup on Christmas Day. And one of the guests who came to Winterthur told Mr. DuPont that told us that he found out very quickly that Mr. DuPont watched to see who ate the terrapin soup. And so he advised other guests, if you don't like terrapin, don't take any or take only a small amount, because he will not be happy to see any of his mother's soup left in the bowl. So whatever you took, you had to eat.
So many stories.
So many stories.
So beautiful. Everything that you guys have set up for Yuletide every year is really gorgeous. So if someone wants to come out and check it out, how do they, what do they do?
Oh, well, they call Winterthur or go online, either way, to make reservations. We do have very limited capacity this year because we're still practicing safe distancing for COVID. And so we're only allowing 10 people to come in every 10 minutes. The tour begins right here in the conservatory, walks through 2 floors of the house, and exits out the front door, which is down on the 4th floor below us. So it's a matter of calling and making a reservation, and a reservation is absolutely imperative. We had our first weekend just this past Saturday and Sunday, sold out. So really important that people go online or call and make a reservation.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted that you're here.
And we'll be right back. For more information on Yuletide or any of the exhibits here at Winterthur, visit winterthur.org. That'll do it for this week's episode. We're going to leave you with more of the Christmas magic here at Winterthur. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on the 302.